It's just you and me, or we. You here together with me at last. We embrace the stabilo beyond what we would call eternity. It's just you and me, or we. When the night starts to fall, covering us in its embrace, all our hearts will burst forth, blooming into this joyous place. Let us soar along the wind to a place far beyond time won't reach. As long as you're here, all of this love will.
Our first story comes from someone who learned that some parents will literally rewrite history to make themselves look good. My mother-in-law tried to take credit for my pregnancy announcement at Thanksgiving dinner. I'm 26 and my husband Jake is 28. We've been married for 2 years and trying to conceive for about 8 months when we finally got that positive test. We were over the moon. We decided to wait until Thanksgiving to tell our families. Since everyone would be gathered together, we thought it would be the perfect moment to share our joy with the people we love most. I should mention that my mother-in-law, Patricia, has always had this need to be the centre of attention at family gatherings. She's the type who interrupts conversations to tell stories about herself and somehow manages to make every celebration about her past achievements or current struggles. But I figured a pregnancy announcement would be different. This was about her future grandchild. Surely she'd let us have our moment. We planned it carefully. I wore a loose sweater that said, "Thankful for two," and we brought a pumpkin pie with baby booties hidden inside when dessert time came. I stood up with Jake and announced that we had something special to share. Everyone got quiet, and I could feel the anticipation in the room. My heart was racing with excitement as I lifted my sweater to reveal the message underneath. The reaction was everything we hoped for. My mum started crying. My dad jumped up to hug us. Jake's siblings were cheering and asking a million questions. It was pure magic for about 30 seconds. Then Patricia stood up, cleared her throat dramatically, and said, "Well, I've been keeping this secret for weeks, but I suppose now I can tell everyone I knew before anyone else because I have that special mother's intuition." The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at her, confused. Jake and I exchanged glances because we definitely hadn't told her anything. She continued, "I noticed the signs weeks ago. The way she was glowing, how she kept declining wine at dinner. I even bought baby clothes last week because I just knew my maternal instincts are never wrong. I was stunned we'd been incredibly careful not to give any hints. We hadn't changed our behaviour at all, and the wine thing wasn't even true. I had been drinking normally until we found out 3 days earlier. But Patricia was spinning this elaborate tale about how she'd figured it out before we even knew ourselves. She was literally stealing our thunder and rewriting the narrative to make herself the hero of our story. My husband looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His face was red with embarrassment, and I could see him struggling with how to handle his mother without causing a scene. His sister tried to redirect the conversation back to us, but Patricia kept going on about her incredible intuition and how she'd been dropping hints to see if we'd confess. I finally spoke up and said, "Actually, Patricia, we just found out ourselves 3 days ago, and we haven't told anyone or changed our behaviour in any way. We wanted this to be a surprise for everyone." She looked flustered for a moment, then doubled down, claiming that a mother always knows, even before the couple does, and that she'd been praying for this news for months. The rest of the evening was uncomfortable. Everyone could sense the tension, and what should have been a beautiful family celebration turned into an awkward situation where we felt like guests at our own announcement. Patricia continued to insert herself into every conversation about the baby, talking about her plans as a grandmother and how she'd always known this day would come. Later that night, Jake apologized profusely for his mother's behavior. He said he'd talk to her about boundaries before the baby arrives. But I can't shake the feeling that this is just the beginning. If she's willing to steal credit for our pregnancy announcement, what will she try to claim once the baby is actually here? The most frustrating part is that some family members seem to buy into her story, or at least didn't want to challenge her. They nodded along when she talked about her intuition and even asked her how she knew we were pregnant. It felt like our special moment had been completely hijacked and rebranded as Patricia's psychic abilities. I keep replaying the evening in my head, wondering if I should have been more direct in shutting down her claims, but I also didn't want to cause a huge family fight. On Thanksgiving, Jake says I handled it perfectly and that everyone with half a brain could see what she was doing, but it still hurts that our announcement got overshadowed by her need for attention. Now I'm worried about every milestone going forward. Will she try to take credit for feeling the baby kick first? Will she claim she predicted the gender? Will our child's first words somehow be attributed to her special grandmother, Powers? I love Jake, and I want our child to have a relationship with his family, but I'm not sure how to deal with a mother-in-law who seems incapable of letting anyone else have a moment in the spotlight. Wow, Patricia really said, "I have maternal intuition superpowers," and everyone just went along with it. Like, that's a real thing. Imagine being so desperate for attention that you literally steal someone's pregnancy announcement and turn it into your own personal psychic reading show. This woman is going to be a nightmare once that baby arrives and she starts claiming she taught it how to walk. Speaking of parents who can't stay in their lane, let's dive into this next story about a mother who took helicopter parenting to terrifying new heights. My mum got me fired from my dream job because she thought my boss was being mean to me. I'm 24 years old, and after graduating college, I finally landed my dream job at a prestigious marketing firm in downtown Seattle. The position was everything I had worked for: creative, challenging, and with amazing growth potential. I was thrilled to start my career and prove myself in the professional world. My boss, Jennifer, was tough but fair. She had high standards and wasn't afraid to give direct feedback when something needed improvement coming from college, where professors often sugar-coated criticism. It was definitely an adjustment, but I appreciated her honesty and knew it would make me better at my job. She was the type of leader who pushed you to excel, and I respected that about her. About 2 months into the job, I was working on a major campaign for a tech startup. It was my first big solo project, and I was nervous but excited to show what I could do. I had been putting in long hours, researching the target demographic and crafting what I thought was a brilliant strategy. When I presented it to Jennifer, she pointed out several flaws in my approach and told me to start over. I was disappointed but understood her feedback. The strategy I had developed was too generic and didn't really capture what made this startup unique. She was right, and I knew I could do better. I went home that night, determined to create something amazing. I called my mum to vent about my frustration and get some encouragement like I always did when things got tough. I explained how my boss had rejected my first draft and asked me to completely rethink my approach. I told my mum about the specific feedback Jennifer had given me and how I planned to incorporate those suggestions into a stronger campaign. My mum listened and seemed supportive, telling me that everyone faces setbacks and that this was just part of learning the business. What I didn't realise was that my mum had been taking mental notes about everything I told her. About work, she knew my boss's name, where I worked, and apparently had been forming her own opinions about whether Jennifer was treating me fairly. In her mind, any criticism of her precious daughter was automatically unfair and mean-spirited. The next morning, I arrived at work excited to present my revised strategy to Jennifer. I had worked until midnight, perfecting every detail, and I was confident this version captured exactly what the client needed. But when I walked into the office, the receptionist gave me a strange look and told me Jennifer wanted to see me immediately. I knocked on Jennifer's door and she invited me in, but her expression was cold and professional in a way I hadn't seen before. She closed the door behind me and asked me to sit down. Then she said, "We need to talk about the phone call I received yesterday from your mother." My stomach dropped. Apparently, while I was working on my revised campaign, my mum had decided to call my office and give Jennifer a piece of her mind. She had introduced herself as my mother and proceeded to lecture my boss about proper management techniques and how to treat young employees with respect. She told Jennifer that making me start over was discouraging and unprofessional. My mum had apparently spent 20 minutes on the phone explaining how hard I had worked on the original campaign and how Jennifer's feedback was crushing my spirit. She suggested that maybe Jennifer needed to learn better communication skills and that experienced managers should know how to motivate rather than tear down their employees. I wanted to disappear into the floor. I couldn't believe my mother had called my workplace and confronted my boss about giving me professional feedback. It was mortifying, and I knew immediately that this was a career-ending mistake. Jennifer told me that while she understood my mum meant well, having family members call to argue about work decisions was completely inappropriate. She explained that in a professional environment, employees need to be able to handle feedback and criticism independently, and that my mother's call raised serious questions about my maturity and readiness for the corporate world. She said she couldn't have team members whose parents might call to complain whenever they received constructive criticism. Jennifer was professional but firm. She told me that this incident made her question whether I was ready for the responsibilities of the position, and that the company couldn't risk having family members interfere with business operations. She gave me the option to resign or be terminated for unprofessional conduct. I chose to resign because I didn't want a termination on my record, but I was devastated. This was my dream job, and I had been working so hard to prove myself now. It was over, because my mum had decided to fight my battles for me. Like I was still in elementary school, I packed up my desk in shame, while my co-workers whispered and stared. When I got home, I confronted my mum about what she had done. She seemed genuinely surprised that I was upset. She said she was just trying to help, and that she couldn't stand to see her daughter being treated poorly by a mean boss. She insisted that Jennifer was out of line, and that any good manager would have appreciated her feedback. I tried to explain that what she did was career suicide, and that I would now have to explain this situation in future job interviews. My mum got defensive and said that if Jennifer couldn't handle a concerned parent, then maybe it wasn't the right place for me anyway. She seemed to think she'd done me a favour by exposing my boss's true character. It took me 4 months to find another job, and even then I had to take a significant pay cut and start at a much smaller company. The whole experience taught me that I needed to set serious boundaries with my mum about my professional life, but it also cost me the career opportunity I had worked so hard to achieve. The worst part is that my mum still doesn't understand what she did wrong. She occasionally asks if I've heard from Jennifer and suggests that maybe I should go back and ask for my job back, because surely they've realised their mistake by now. She lives in this alternate reality where she was the hero protecting her daughter from workplace bullying. That's not helicopter parenting, that's kamikaze parenting. Your mum literally called your boss to complain about you getting normal workplace feedback, and then acted shocked when it backfired spectacularly. Imagine explaining that in job interviews. Oh, why did you leave your last position? Well, my mummy called to tell my boss she was being mean to me. Some parents really think the world revolves around protecting their adult children from basic life experiences. Our next story shows what happens when entitled parents decide that other people's property is basically a free rental service. My neighbour demanded I give her my car because she has kids, and I don't. I'm 23 years old, and I live in a small apartment complex in Phoenix. I work remotely as a graphic designer, which means I don't drive to an office every day, but I do need my car for groceries, appointments, and visiting family. About 6 months ago, a new family moved into the unit next to mine, a single mom named Linda, with 3 kids aged 5, 8 and 10. Linda seemed nice enough at first. We'd wave in the hallway and make small talk about the weather or the building's broken elevator. Her kids were loud, but not unusually so. For apartment living, I figured we'd be the kind of neighbours who keep to ourselves, but stay cordial when we cross paths. About a month after she moved in, Linda knocked on my door. One evening, she explained that her car had broken down, and she needed to get her youngest to a doctor's appointment. The next morning, she asked if she could borrow my car for a few hours. I was hesitant because I barely knew her, but she seemed desperate, and it was just for a medical emergency, so I agreed. She returned the car with a full tank of gas and was incredibly grateful. She thanked me multiple times and said she'd never forget my kindness. I felt good about helping a neighbour in need and figured that would be the end of it. But apparently, Linda took my one-time favour as an invitation to treat my car like her personal vehicle. 2 weeks later, she knocked again. This time she needed to take her middle child to soccer practice, and her car was in the shop again. I reluctantly agreed because I didn't have any plans that evening, but I mentioned that I couldn't make this a regular thing. She nodded and promised it would just be this once, but the requests kept coming. Every few weeks, Linda would appear at my door with a new transportation emergency. Her car was getting repaired. Her sister couldn't give her a ride. She had to pick up groceries for all 3 kids each time. She'd emphasise how much harder everything was for her as a single mother, and how lucky I was to not have those responsibilities. I started to feel manipulated, but I also felt guilty saying no to someone who clearly struggled financially. I could see her kids through the window sometimes, and they seemed like good kids who deserved to get to their activities and appointments. So I kept saying yes, even though it was becoming increasingly inconvenient. The turning point came when Linda started assuming she could use my car. Without asking, she'd text me things like, "Need the car for 2 hours tomorrow afternoon," or "Can you leave the keys under my mat?" I have an early appointment. I realised she had completely crossed the line from asking favours to expecting access to my property. I decided to have a conversation with her about boundaries. I knocked on her door one Saturday morning and explained that while I wanted to help when there were true emergencies, I needed my car to be available for my own needs. I suggested she look into public transportation or rideshare services for regular activities. Linda's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of understanding, she became defensive and angry. She said that I was being selfish and that people without children couldn't possibly understand the challenges of single parenthood. She accused me of having a car that just sits in the parking lot most days, while her family suffered without reliable transportation. I tried to stay calm and reiterated that my car was my property and my responsibility. I explained that I had been more than generous with lending it out, but that I needed to prioritise my own needs. She rolled her eyes and said that people like me were the reason society was falling apart because we only cared about ourselves. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I thought I had made my position clear. I stopped responding to her texts about borrowing the car and avoided making eye contact when we passed in the hallway. I hoped she would get the message and find alternative transportation solutions, but Linda wasn't done. A few weeks later, I came home from grocery shopping to find her waiting by my car in the parking lot. She approached me as I was unloading bags and said we needed to talk. She explained that she had been thinking about our situation and had come up with what she called a fair solution. Linda proposed that since I didn't really need my car every day and she had 3 children who needed to get to school activities and appointments, we should work out a shared custody arrangement. She suggested that she could have access to the car Monday through Friday during school hours, and I could have it evenings and weekends. I stared at her in disbelief. This woman was seriously suggesting that I should give her regular access to my car because she had decided her needs were more important than mine. I told her that wasn't going to happen and that she needed to find her own transportation solutions. Linda's expression changed from hopeful to furious. She started yelling about how selfish and heartless I was. She said that anyone with basic human decency would help a struggling mother, and that my refusal to share proved I was a terrible person. She accused me of letting innocent children suffer because I was too greedy to share my resources. She went on a rant about how people without kids didn't deserve the same privileges as parents because they didn't have real responsibilities. She said the world would be a better place if selfish people like me were forced to help families in need, instead of hoarding resources we didn't even use. I was so shocked by her entitlement that I could barely respond. I managed to say that my car was not community property and that her transportation problems were not my responsibility. Then I walked away while she continued yelling about my selfishness, loud enough for the whole complex to hear. The next morning I found a note under my door. It was 3 pages long and detailed all the reasons why Linda deserved access to my car. More than I did, she had calculated how many miles I drove per week versus how many miles she needed and determined that her usage would be more efficient. She even included a proposed schedule for sharing the note. Also contained guilt trips about her children. Missing opportunities because their mother couldn't drive them places. She wrote about how my refusal was directly harming 3 innocent kids and that I would have to live with that on my conscience. She ended by saying she was willing to pay me $20 a month for the privilege of using my car during the week. I showed the note to my boyfriend, who couldn't believe someone would actually write something so entitled. He suggested I report it to the apartment management, since Linda was clearly harassing me about my personal property. I decided to keep the note as evidence in case things escalated further. They did escalate. Linda began parking her broken down car behind mine, so I couldn't leave without asking her to move it. She claimed it was the only available spot, but there were clearly other spaces in the lot when I confronted her about it. She acted innocent and said she had every right to park there. She also started making passive-aggressive comments whenever she saw me in the hallway. Things like, "Must be nice to have a working car sitting unused," or "Some people don't know how good they have it." Her kids seemed embarrassed by her behaviour and would avoid eye contact when she made these remarks. Finally, I had enough. I went to the apartment office and filed a complaint about harassment. The property manager was sympathetic and said they'd received similar complaints about Linda from other residents. Apparently, she had also asked several neighbours to babysit her kids for free and had gotten angry when they refused. The manager spoke with Linda about appropriate neighbour relationships and warned her that continued harassment could result in eviction. I don't know exactly what was said, but Linda stopped bothering me about my car after that conversation. She also moved her car to a different parking spot. We still see each other occasionally in the hallway, but we don't speak. Linda gives me dirty looks and sometimes makes comments under her breath, but I ignore her completely. Her kids seem like they're doing fine, despite not having regular access to my vehicle, which proves that she was perfectly capable of finding other solutions. Looking back, I realise I should have set boundaries much earlier, instead of enabling her sense of entitlement by repeatedly saying yes to her requests. But I learned an important lesson about how some people will take advantage of kindness and turn it into an expectation of ongoing service. Linda really said your car is basically communal property because I have children, and you don't, as if having kids gives you eminent domain over other people's vehicles. The entitlement is staggering. She literally tried to negotiate a custody agreement for someone else's car and then got mad when reality didn't bend to her demands. Let's move to a story that shows how some parents think their child's desires automatically override everyone else's property rights. My sister-in-law tried to force me to sell my house to her for half price because her daughter loved it. I'm 29 and my husband Alex is 31. We've been married for 3 years and we recently bought our first home together. It's a beautiful colonial-style house with 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, and it's in an excellent school district. We saved for years to afford the down payment, and we're incredibly proud of our new place. Alex has a younger sister, Jessica, who's 35 and married with 2 kids, a 7-year-old daughter named Chloe, and a 4-year-old son. The family dynamic has always been complicated because Jessica was the golden child growing up, and she still expects everyone to cater to her wishes, even as an adult. When we invited the extended family over for a housewarming party, everyone was complimentary about our new place. We gave tours, showed off the renovations we'd done, and talked about our plans for the backyard. Jessica seemed happy for us, and her kids had fun running around, exploring all the rooms. Chloe was particularly enchanted with the house. She kept asking questions about every room and talked about how much she loved the reading nook we'd created in one of the bedrooms. She was sweet about it, and we enjoyed seeing the house through a child's eyes. It felt good to know that our hard work had created a space that felt magical to someone so young. About a week after the party, Jessica called and asked if she could bring Chloe over to see the house again. She said her daughter hadn't stopped talking about it and wanted to show her some ideas she had for decorating. I thought it was cute and invited them over for the weekend. During that visit, Chloe was even more excited about the house than before. She had apparently been drawing pictures of her favourite rooms and had ideas about where she'd put her toys if she lived there. Jessica encouraged this behaviour and kept asking me detailed questions about our mortgage payments, property taxes, and what we thought the house was worth. I found the financial questions odd, but assumed Jessica was just curious about home ownership, since she and her husband had been renting for years. I answered politely, but started to feel uncomfortable when she began taking notes about everything I told her. A few days later, Jessica called and asked if we could meet for coffee. She said she had something important to discuss. I assumed she wanted advice about house hunting, since she'd been asking so many questions about home ownership. But what she proposed was completely insane. Jessica explained that Chloe had been crying every night since visiting our house, because she wanted to live there so badly. She said her daughter had never connected with a place like this before, and that it was clearly meant to be their family home. She spoke as if the house had chosen Chloe rather than us having bought it. Then came the proposal. Jessica suggested that since Chloe loved the house so much, and since we didn't have children yet, we should consider selling it to her family. She acknowledged that they couldn't afford the full market value, but offered to buy it for exactly half of what we paid, essentially asking us to take a massive financial loss so her daughter could have her dream house. I was speechless. The audacity of asking us to sell our home at a huge loss just because her child liked it was beyond anything I could have imagined. Jessica seemed to interpret my silence as consideration rather than shock, and continued explaining why this arrangement would benefit everyone. She argued that we were young and could easily find another house, whereas Chloe was at a crucial age where stability and the right environment were essential. She claimed that children's needs should always come first and that we'd understand once we had kids of our own. She made it sound like keeping our own house was somehow selfish. Jessica also mentioned that the house was too big for just the two of us and that a family with children would make better use of the space. She said it seemed wasteful for us to have 4 bedrooms when we only needed one, and that Chloe could really flourish in such a beautiful environment. I finally found my voice and told Jessica that we weren't interested in selling our house at any price, let alone for half its value. I explained that this was our dream home too, and that we had worked incredibly hard to afford it. Her reaction was immediate and explosive. She accused me of being heartless and selfish. She said that anyone who truly loved children would want to see them happy, and that my refusal was devastating to Chloe. She claimed that I was putting money above a child's emotional well-being, and that this would traumatize her daughter Jessica, then tried a different approach. She suggested that maybe we could work out a rent-to-own arrangement where they would live in the house and gradually buy it from us over time. She proposed that they pay us what they currently paid in rent, which was about a third of our mortgage payment. When I again said no, Jessica became increasingly desperate. She offered to let us live in their rental apartment, which was a tiny 2-bedroom place in a much less desirable neighborhood. She seemed to genuinely believe this was a fair trade and couldn't understand why I wasn't jumping at the opportunity. The conversation ended with Jessica storming out of the coffee shop, but not before telling everyone within earshot that I was refusing to help a child in need. She made it sound like I was denying medicine to a sick kid rather than declining to sell my house at a massive loss. Over the next few weeks, Jessica launched a full-scale campaign to pressure us into selling. She called other family members to explain the situation from her perspective, making it sound like we were being unreasonably stubborn about helping Chloe. She conveniently left out the part about expecting us to lose $50,000. In the process, Alex's parents called to ask if we'd consider Jessica's offer. They had been told that it was just a matter of price negotiation, not that she wanted us to essentially give away half the value of our home. When Alex explained the real numbers, his parents were shocked and immediately stopped pressuring us. Jessica also tried to use Chloe as emotional leverage. She would bring her daughter to family gatherings and have her talk about how sad she was that she couldn't live in the pretty house. Chloe would ask me directly why I wouldn't let her family live there, and it was clear she'd been coached on what to say. The whole situation reached a breaking point at Alex's birthday dinner. Jessica stood up during dessert and made a speech about family priorities. She talked about how some people put material possessions above the happiness of children, and how disappointing it was to see such selfishness within the family. Everyone at the table knew she was talking about me, and the room became incredibly uncomfortable. Alex finally stood up and told his sister that her behaviour was inappropriate and that she needed to stop harassing us about our house. He made it clear that we would never sell and that she needed to find another solution for her housing situation. Jessica broke down crying and accused Alex of choosing me over his own niece. She said that his loyalty should be to his family first and that I had obviously poisoned him against his sister. Several other family members tried to calm the situation, but Jessica was inconsolable. She eventually left the restaurant with her family, but not before announcing that she would never forgive us for crushing her daughter's dreams. She said that every time Chloe asked about the house, she would have to explain that her aunt and uncle cared more about money than her happiness. In the weeks that followed, Jessica continued to post passive-aggressive messages on social media about people who have more than they need, while children suffer. She never mentioned us by name, but the context was obvious to anyone who knew about the house situation. Eventually, Jessica and her husband did find a house to buy in a different school district. It's smaller than ours and not as updated, but it's a perfectly nice home for their family. Chloe seems happy there and has stopped asking about our house, though Jessica still makes occasional comments about how things could have been different. The whole experience taught me that some people feel entitled to other people's property just because they want it more. Jessica genuinely believed that her daughter's desire for our house was more important than our right to own it. She couldn't comprehend why we wouldn't sacrifice our financial security for her child's preference. Wow. Jessica literally tried to negotiate buying someone else's house for half price because her kid liked it, and then got mad when basic economics didn't work that way. Imagine thinking that your child's temporary infatuation with a house means the owners should take a $50,000 loss so your family can have it. The delusion is breathtaking. She really thought emotional manipulation would convince people to give away their life savings. If you're still here listening to these wild stories, consider subscribing, because there's always more unhinged family drama where this came from. And honestly, we could all use a reminder that our own relatives might be difficult, but at least they're not trying to steal our cars or houses. Let's dive into our next story about a parent who thought public property was basically their personal playground. My neighbour called the police on me for using the public park because her son was having a birthday party there. I'm 31 and I live in a quiet suburban neighbourhood with my wife and our 2 dogs. We don't have kids yet, but we love taking our golden retrievers to the local park for their evening walks and weekend fetch sessions. It's a beautiful public park with open fields, walking trails, and a playground area that's always busy with families. The park has been part of our daily routine for 3 years. We usually go around 6 in the evening when it's less crowded and our dogs can run freely in the open grass areas. We're always responsible. Pet owners, we clean up after our dogs, keep them on leash when required, and make sure they don't bother other park users. Last Saturday, we arrived at our usual time and noticed that someone had set up an elaborate birthday party in the main field area. There were tables, chairs, a bouncy house, and decorations everywhere. It looked like they were expecting a lot of guests and had clearly put significant effort into the setup. I didn't think much of it. People use the park for parties all the time, and there's plenty of space for everyone. The field they were using was maybe a quarter of the total open area, so we headed to the far end where we always play fetch with our dogs. We were easily 100 yards away from their party setup. We'd been there for maybe 10 minutes throwing tennis balls for our dogs when a woman marched over to us. She was probably in her late 30s, wearing a floral dress and had that particular expression that meant trouble. She introduced herself as Monica and said she needed to talk to us about the situation. Monica explained that she was hosting her son's 7th birthday party and that our dogs were going to ruin everything. She said that children were afraid of dogs and that having pets in the same area would make her guests uncomfortable. She asked if we could come back tomorrow instead. I politely explained that this was a public park and that we had as much right to be there as anyone else. I pointed out that we were nowhere near their party area and that our dogs were well behaved and under control. Monica's face turned red, and she said that wasn't the point. She insisted that when someone was hosting a special event, like a birthday party, other park users should be considerate enough to find somewhere else to go. She said that any reasonable person would understand that a child's birthday only happens once a year, and that our dog walking could happen any time. I told her that while I understood she wanted her son's party to be perfect, we weren't doing anything wrong or disruptive. Our dogs were playing in a completely different section of the park, and we weren't bothering anyone. Monica seemed to think that our mere presence was somehow threatening to ruin her entire event. She then demanded to know if we had gotten permission to bring dogs to the park. I explained that dogs were allowed in designated areas and that we always followed the posted rules. Monica said that didn't matter because she had reserved the entire park for her son's party. When I asked to see her reservation paperwork, Monica became flustered and said that she didn't need paperwork because she'd been planning this party for months. She claimed that anyone with common sense would know that a birthday party took priority over casual park activities. The conversation was getting more heated, so I suggested we just agree to stay in our separate areas of the park. Monica said that wasn't good enough because the sight of our dogs would still upset the children. Even from a distance, she demanded that we leave immediately and threatened to call security. I pointed out that there was no security at this public park and that we weren't breaking any rules or ordinances. Monica stormed back to her party setup, and I assumed that would be the end of it. We continued playing with our dogs and minded our own business. About 20 minutes later, we heard sirens and saw a police car pulling into the park parking lot. I couldn't believe someone had actually called the cops over a neighbour dispute about public park usage. But sure enough, 2 officers walked over to speak with Monica first. After a few minutes, one of the officers approached us. He looked slightly embarrassed and asked if we were the people with the dogs. I confirmed that we were and explained our side of the situation. The officer nodded and said he had to ask us a few routine questions. He asked if our dogs were current on their vaccinations, if they were licensed, and if we had any documentation with us. I showed him our dog licenses and vaccination records that I always carry in my wallet. The officer seemed satisfied and said everything appeared to be in order. Then he explained that Monica had called 911 to report that we were harassing her family and threatening to let our dogs attack the children at the birthday party. She had apparently told the dispatcher that we were refusing to leave despite being asked multiple times and that she felt unsafe. The officer asked if we had threatened anyone or made any aggressive statements. I assured him that we had not, and that we'd simply been playing fetch with our dogs in a different area of the park. He walked back to speak with Monica again, and I could see her gesturing wildly and pointing in our direction. When the officer returned, he looked even more uncomfortable. He said that Monica was insisting we had been intimidating and that our dogs had been acting aggressively toward her party guests. He asked if our dogs had approached any children or shown any signs of aggression. I explained that our dogs hadn't been anywhere near the children and had been focused entirely on playing fetch with us. The officer asked if we would mind moving to a different section of the park just to keep the peace. I said we'd be happy to accommodate that request as we were gathering our things to move. Monica called out that we shouldn't be allowed in the park at all if we couldn't respect other families. She told the officer that people like us were the reason families didn't feel safe in public spaces anymore. The second officer, who had been observing the whole situation, finally spoke up. He told Monica that this was a public park and that everyone had equal rights to use it. He explained that unless someone was breaking posted rules or city ordinances, the police couldn't force them to leave. Monica became increasingly agitated and demanded to speak to the officer's supervisor. She said that her tax dollars paid for the park and that she should have priority access. When hosting important family events, the officer patiently explained that tax dollars from all residents supported the park system. She then tried a different approach, claiming that our dogs had damaged the grass and left waste in the play area. This was completely false, since we always cleaned up after our pets and hadn't been near the playground. The officer asked if she had seen us fail to clean up after our dogs. When Monica couldn't provide any specifics, the officer told her that the complaint appeared to be unfounded. He advised both parties to share the park respectfully and said that calling 911 should be reserved for actual emergencies, not neighbour disputes. As the officers were leaving, Monica shouted that this wasn't over and that she would be filing complaints with the city council about dangerous dog owners terrorising families. She said she was going to make sure new rules were put in place to prevent this situation from happening. Again, we ended up moving to a different area of the park anyway, because the whole confrontation had made the atmosphere uncomfortable. But I was amazed that someone would call the police over such a ridiculous non-issue. Our dogs hadn't bothered anyone, and we were following all posted rules. About an hour later, As we were leaving the park, several parents from the birthday party approached us. They apologized for Monica's behavior and said they were embarrassed by how she had handled the situation. One dad said his kids had actually wanted to pet our dogs, but Monica wouldn't let them come over. They explained that Monica had been stressed about the party all week and had been worried that everything wouldn't go perfectly. Apparently, she'd been planning this celebration for months and had built it up so much in her mind that any deviation from her vision felt like a disaster. One mom mentioned that Monica had also complained to them about the park's maintenance schedule because the grass wasn't quite as green as she'd hoped for the photos. She said Monica seemed to think that booking a public space meant she could control every aspect of the environment. The parents were genuinely nice people who understood that public spaces are meant to be shared. They said their children had a wonderful time at the party despite Monica's stress, and that our dogs hadn't caused any problems whatsoever. I learned later from a neighbour that Monica had indeed filed complaints with several city departments about dog policies. In parks, she had written lengthy emails about the need for designated dog-free zones and had requested that the city require advance notice before pet owners could use park facilities. None of her complaints went anywhere since our behaviour had been completely appropriate and legal, but it showed just how far she was willing to go to avoid sharing public space with other community members who weren't part of her specific vision. The whole experience reminded me that some people genuinely believe their personal events give them temporary ownership over public property. Monica couldn't accept that other people had equal rights to enjoy the park. Even during her son's birthday celebration, Monica really called the police because she saw dogs existing in the same public park as her party, like she'd purchased exclusive rights to several acres of municipal property. Imagine explaining to a 911 dispatcher that your emergency was seeing well-behaved pets playing fetch 100 yards away from your bouncer house. Some people think having a special occasion means the world should revolve around their event planning. Our next story involves a mother who decided that her parenting philosophy should override basic safety regulations. My mother-in-law brought my severely allergic daughter peanut butter cookies because she doesn't believe in food allergies. I'm 28 and my husband David is 30. We have a 4-year-old daughter named Lily who was diagnosed with a severe peanut allergy when she was 18 months old. We discovered it the hard way when she had a reaction to a peanut butter sandwich at daycare and had to be rushed to the emergency room in an ambulance. Since then, we've been incredibly careful about managing Lily's allergy. We carry EpiPens everywhere we go. We read every ingredient label. We communicate with teachers and caregivers about her condition, and we've educated our family and friends about the seriousness of her allergy. Lily's reaction isn't mild. She doesn't just get a rash or an upset stomach exposure to peanuts causes her throat to swell, her breathing to become laboured, and her blood pressure to drop dangerously. This is anaphylaxis, and it can be fatal without immediate treatment. We've had to use her EpiPen twice in the past 2 years. My mother-in-law Carmen has always been sceptical about Lily's allergy. She comes from a generation that didn't really deal with food allergies, and she seems to think they're a modern invention or an excuse for picky eating. She's made comments about how kids in her day ate everything and turned out fine. Despite our repeated explanations about the severity of Lily's condition, Carmen continues to minimize it. She suggested that we're being overprotective and that exposure therapy might help Lily outgrow her allergy faster. She's even implied that we're limiting Lily's childhood experiences unnecessarily. We've had several conversations with Carmen about being careful with food around Lily. We've explained that even trace amounts of peanuts can trigger a reaction and that cross-contamination is a real concern. We've asked her to check ingredient labels and to let us know what she's planning to serve when Lily visits. Carmen always agrees to be careful, but then makes comments about how complicated everything has become and how she managed to raise 3 children without worrying about every little ingredient. She seems to view our precautions as excessive anxiety rather than necessary medical management. Last weekend, Carmen offered to babysit Lily While David and I went to a wedding, we were hesitant because of past issues, but Carmen had been on her best behaviour lately, and we really needed the help. We went over all of Lily's safety protocols, gave Carmen our emergency contacts, and left detailed instructions. We also left safe snacks that Lily could eat, and reminded Carmen not to give her anything we hadn't approved. Carmen nodded along and assured us that she understood the importance of keeping Lily safe. We felt confident that she would follow our guidelines. The wedding was beautiful, and we were having a great time until David's phone rang around 8 in the evening. It was Carmen, and she sounded panicked. She said that Lily was having trouble breathing and that she didn't know what to do. We immediately told her to call 911 and said we were on our way. We broke every speed limit getting to the hospital, where we found Lily in the emergency room, with an oxygen mask over her face. She was conscious, but clearly struggling to breathe. The medical team was monitoring her vital signs and had already administered epinephrine. Carmen was in the waiting room crying and saying she didn't understand what had happened. The doctor pulled us aside and explained that Lily had experienced severe anaphylaxis and that she was lucky Carmen had called for help. When she did, a few more minutes could have been catastrophic. When we asked Carmen what had happened, she became defensive and evasive. She kept saying that she'd only given Lily approved foods and that she couldn't understand why this had occurred. It wasn't until we pressed her repeatedly that the truth finally came out. Carmen admitted that she had made peanut butter cookies for Lily because she wanted to test whether the allergy was real. She said she'd only given Lily a small bite and had been watching carefully to see what would happen. She genuinely believed that exposure in a controlled environment would prove that we were overreacting. I was so angry I couldn't speak. David was furious and asked his mother how she could risk their daughter's life. To prove a point, Carmen started crying and saying that she never thought anything serious would happen. She claimed she was trying to help by showing us that Lily didn't really have an allergy. The medical team had to explain to Carmen that what she had done was essentially poisoning a child with a known severe allergy. They told her that anaphylaxis can be fatal and that her experiment could have killed Lily. Carmen seemed genuinely shocked that her actions had been so dangerous. Lily had to stay in the hospital overnight for observation, which was terrifying for all of us. She didn't understand why she couldn't breathe properly and kept asking if she was going to be okay seeing our 4-year-old hooked up to monitors because of her grandmother's reckless experiment was heartbreaking. When we got home the next day, I told David that Carmen was no longer allowed to be alone with Lily. Ever again, I couldn't trust someone who would deliberately expose our child to a life-threatening allergen to prove their point about modern parenting being too cautious. Carmen called repeatedly over the next few days, trying to apologize and explain that she'd made a mistake. She kept saying that she loves Lily and would never intentionally hurt her, but the damage was done. She had shown that her need to be right was more important than our daughter's safety. She also tried to shift blame by saying that if the allergy was really that severe, we should have been more explicit about the consequences. This was particularly infuriating since we'd had countless conversations about the seriousness of Lily's condition, including showing her photos of previous reactions. David supported my decision to cut off Carmen's unsupervised access to Lily, but it caused a huge rift in his family. His father called us unreasonable and said that Carmen had learned her lesson. His siblings were divided, with some understanding our position and others thinking we were being too harsh. The family drama escalated when Carmen started telling relatives her version of events, where she was a concerned grandmother who made an innocent mistake, and we were vindictive parents who were keeping her from her granddaughter. She left out the part about deliberately feeding peanuts to a severely allergic child. Several family members reached out to mediate and suggest compromise solutions, like supervised visits or family counselling. But I remained firm that Carmen couldn't be trusted. Alone with Lily, the hospital bill alone was over $3,000, not to mention the trauma Lily experienced. Months later, Carmen still doesn't fully grasp the severity of what she did. She's apologized for the outcome but never acknowledged that deliberately exposing Lily to peanuts was attempted harm. She still frames it as a well-intentioned mistake rather than a dangerous violation of trust. We've started seeing a family therapist who specializes in medical trauma to help Lily process what happened. She's developed anxiety around eating and sometimes asks if her food is safe, even when we've prepared it ourselves. The psychological impact of her grandmother's experiment will likely last years. Carmen continues to ask when she can see Lily again and suggests that we're punishing her too harshly for one mistake. But keeping our daughter alive isn't punishment. It's our primary responsibility as parents, and we can't risk another experiment in Carmen's ongoing denial about food allergies. Carmen literally fed peanut butter cookies to a child with severe anaphylaxis to prove that modern allergies are fake, and then acted surprised when the kid ended up in the hospital. Fighting for her life, she turned her granddaughter into a lab rat to win an argument about whether food allergies are real. The fact that she still frames this as an innocent mistake rather than child endangerment shows she learned absolutely nothing. Now let's read about a parent who thought her son's social media fame meant everyone else should treat him like royalty. My sister expects me to pay for her son's entire birthday party because he has followers on TikTok. I'm 25 and work as a nurse at a busy metropolitan hospital. It's demanding work, but I love what I do, and I've been able to save up some money for a down payment on my first apartment. My older sister, Rebecca, is 32 and has a 14-year-old son named Tyler, who she's convinced is going to be the next big social media star. Tyler started making TikTok videos about 2 years ago, and he's actually pretty good at it. He does comedy skits, dance videos, and reaction content that genuinely makes people laugh. He currently has around 80,000 followers, which is impressive for a teenager, but Rebecca acts like he's already a Hollywood celebrity. The problem is that Rebecca has completely reorganized her life around Tyler's social media career. She quit her job to be his full-time manager, even though he's not making significant money yet. She spends their entire budget on filming equipment, designer clothes, for his videos and promotional activities. Rebecca constantly talks about Tyler's follower count and engagement rates, like their stock prices. She screenshots comments from fans and shares them in our family group chat. She's created business cards for Tyler and has started charging appearance fees for him to attend local events. About a month ago, Rebecca called to tell me that Tyler's 15th birthday was coming up and that she was planning something special. She explained that this birthday was crucial for his brand development and that they needed to throw a party that would generate viral content. She'd already started planning an elaborate celebration with a professional photographer, videographer, custom decorations, catered food, and party favors for all the guests. She estimated that the total cost would be around $8,000, which seemed absolutely insane for a teenager's birthday party. When I asked how she planned to pay for such an expensive event, Rebecca explained that this was where I came in. She said that as Tyler's aunt and biggest supporter, I should want to invest in his future success. She framed the party expenses as a business investment rather than a personal celebration. Rebecca argued that Tyler's social media presence was bringing positive attention to our entire family and that supporting his career would benefit everyone. She said that successful influencers often had family members who helped fund their early content creation and that this party could be Tyler's breakthrough moment. She also mentioned that Tyler had been stressed about maintaining his online presence while dealing with typical teenage problems, and that this party would give him amazing content while also letting him enjoy being a kid. She made it sound like I'd be cruel to deny him this opportunity. I was shocked by her expectation that I should fund Tyler's birthday party, especially at such an outrageous price point. I told Rebecca that $8,000 was more than most people spend on weddings, and that it seemed excessive for any child's birthday, regardless of their social media status. Rebecca became defensive and said that I didn't understand the influencer industry or how important it was to maintain a consistent brand image. She explained that Tyler's followers expected high-quality content and that a basic birthday party wouldn't generate the engagement they needed. She also guilt-tripped me by saying that Tyler had specifically mentioned wanting his aunt to help make his birthday special. She claimed that he'd been talking about how excited he was that I might be involved in planning his celebration, and that disappointing him would damage our relationship when I suggested that maybe the party budget should be more reasonable. Rebecca said that thinking small was exactly why most people never achieved success. She told me that Tyler had real potential to become a major influencer, and that missing opportunities like this could set his career back significantly. I tried to explain that I had my own financial goals, and that spending $8,000 on a party wasn't in my budget. Rebecca seemed genuinely surprised that I would prioritize my apartment fund over Tyler's birthday celebration. She asked what was more important than supporting family. She then offered to let me pay in installments or to cover just specific aspects of the party. Like the photographer or the catering, she said that even a partial contribution would show Tyler that his family believed in his dreams and was willing to invest in his success. When I continued to decline, Rebecca's tone shifted from persuasive to accusatory. She said that I was being selfish and short-sighted, and that I'd regret not supporting Tyler. When he became famous, she accused me of being jealous of a teenager's success and of trying to hold him back. She also brought up times when our parents had helped me financially during college and suggested that I owed the family some reciprocal support. She said that Tyler's influencer career was equivalent to my nursing degree and deserved the same investment from family members. The conversation ended badly, with Rebecca hanging up on me after saying that she'd remember who supported Tyler during his rise to fame and who didn't. She made it clear that she expected me to change my mind and that Tyler would be disappointed to learn about my lack of support. Over the next few weeks, Rebecca sent me articles about successful influencers who had family backing and screenshots of Tyler's videos performing well. She also had Tyler text me directly, asking if I was going to help with his birthday party, which felt manipulative. I stood firm in my decision not to fund the extravagant party, but I did offer to contribute a reasonable amount toward a more modest celebration. Rebecca rejected this compromise and said that anything less than her original vision would be inadequate for Tyler's brand. Eventually, Rebecca borrowed money from our parents and put the rest on credit cards to throw Tyler's dream birthday party. The event was indeed elaborate and generated plenty of social media content, but the financial stress it created for their family was obvious. The party photos looked amazing online, and Tyler's followers seemed impressed, but the reality was that Rebecca had gone into serious debt to create content for a 14-year-old's social media account. The whole situation felt like a cautionary tale about prioritizing image over financial stability. Months later, Rebecca is still struggling to pay off the party expenses and has started asking other family members for loans. Tyler's follower count did increase after the birthday content, but not enough to generate significant income. The return on investment for that $8,000 party was essentially zero. Tyler himself seems embarrassed by his mother's financial sacrifice and has started making more modest content that doesn't require expensive production values. He's actually more relatable now, that he's not constantly showcasing luxury items that his family couldn't afford. The whole experience taught me that some parents will sacrifice their financial security to fuel their children's dreams, even when those dreams are based more on social media metrics than realistic career planning. Rebecca genuinely believed that one viral birthday party could launch Tyler's influencer empire. That was the end of that story. Rebecca wanted $8,000 for her son's birthday party because he has TikTok followers. Like, having an audience of teenagers means you deserve a wedding-level celebration budget. She really thought social media fame entitled her family to crowd-funded luxury events. Some parents will literally go into debt chasing internet validation for their kids. the next story. My entitled mother-in-law tried to steal my wedding dress because her daughter deserved it more. I'm 26 and I got married last month to the love of my life, David. The whole experience should have been magical, but my mother-in-law Patricia turned it into an absolute nightmare that I'm still processing weeks later. David and I had been together for 3 years before we got engaged, and during that time I thought I had a pretty good relationship with his family. Patricia was always sweet to my face, asking about my job, complimenting my cooking when we'd visit for Sunday dinners. She seemed genuinely excited when David proposed, immediately asking about wedding plans and offering to help however she could. The problem started when David's younger sister, Jessica, got engaged about 6 months after we did. Jessica is 23, works part-time at a boutique, and has always been the golden child who could do no wrong in Patricia's eyes. The moment Jessica announced her engagement, something shifted. Suddenly every conversation with Patricia became a comparison between our 2 weddings. When I mentioned I'd found my dream dress, Patricia asked to see pictures. I was hesitant at first, but David encouraged me to share since she'd been so supportive. The dress was this gorgeous vintage-inspired gown with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing train that I'd saved up for months to afford. It cost me nearly $2,000, which was a huge stretch on my teacher's salary, but it was perfect. Patricia's reaction was interesting. She stared at the photo for a long time, then said it was beautiful, but maybe a bit too sophisticated for someone my age. I brushed off the comment, thinking she was just being protective or maybe a little jealous that Jessica hadn't found her dress yet. 3 weeks before my wedding, I got a call from the bridal shop. The woman on the phone sounded confused and apologetic. She said someone claiming to be my mother had come in with a copy of my receipt and tried to take my dress, saying there had been a family emergency and they needed to move the pickup date. Fortunately, the shop has strict policies about dress pickup requiring photo identification, so they refused to release it. My blood ran cold. I immediately called Patricia, thinking maybe there was some misunderstanding. When she answered, her voice was strangely defensive before I even said anything. I asked if she'd been to my bridal shop, and there was this long pause before she said she just wanted to surprise me by picking it up early so I wouldn't have to make the trip. That explanation might have made sense if it wasn't complete nonsense. The shop was literally 5 minutes from my apartment, and I had specifically scheduled my pickup for the weekend before the wedding because I wanted to do a final fitting. I told Patricia this, and she got flustered, saying she was just trying to help and didn't understand why I was being so suspicious. I let it go, but something felt wrong. I called the bridal shop back and asked them to describe the woman who tried to pick up my dress. The description matched Patricia perfectly, down to her distinctive red hair and the pearl earrings she always wore. But here's the kicker. When I asked what reason she'd given for the emergency pickup, the shop employee said she'd mentioned needing the dress for her daughter's wedding that weekend. My wedding was still 3 weeks away. Jessica's wedding wasn't for another 8 months. I confronted David about it that night, and he was just as confused as I was. He called his mum, and I could hear her getting increasingly agitated on the other end of the line. Finally, she admitted she'd gone to the shop, but she claimed it was because Jessica had fallen in love with my dress from the photos and was heartbroken that she couldn't have something similar. According to Patricia, Jessica had been crying for weeks about how unfair it was that I got the perfect dress while she was stuck with whatever leftovers she could find. Patricia said she just wanted to see if maybe we could work out some kind of arrangement where Jessica could wear the dress for her wedding, since hers was so much later, and I could find something else. I was speechless. She was seriously suggesting that I give up the dress I'd saved for and dreamed about so her daughter could wear it instead. When I pointed out that Jessica could literally order the exact same dress from the same designer, Patricia said it wouldn't be the same because mine was the original, and Jessica deserved to have something special for her big day. David was furious. He told